It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
The newest attack just a short time ago affecting Americans coast to coast tonight. The FBI and Homeland Security taking this very seriously. Sites like Netflix, Amazon, eBay, all affected. And look at this map tonight. The areas in deep red there, the worst affected. Several waves of malicious attacks today.
The company called it extremely sophisticated and complex. And just 2 weeks ago, David, the first documented account of a bot using surveillance cameras in an attack. These are called the Internet of Things. Your printers or your faxes hooked up to the internet, they're not secure. Someone's figured out how to use them in an attack, and they may have used it in this one.
The second cyber attack that was hit the cloud-based internet company Dyn, which has impacted several major websites, includes Amazon and even Gmail. Twitter also says that its users may be having trouble accessing its site as well.
I know that the Department of Homeland Security, that is the U.S. government agency that is responsible for monitoring our security in cyberspace and coordinating with the public and private sector to protect U.S. interests in cyberspace, is monitoring this situation, and they'll take a close look at it. But at this point, I don't have any information to share about who may be responsible for that malicious activity.
Much of the U.S. woke up to find a cyber attack had slowed down or outright blocked access to a bunch of big-name websites. But how does a single attack take down Twitter, Spotify, and SoundCloud all at once? Simple. It hits the right part of the network, the address book.
We need to understand the real and present danger that potentially a resurgent Russia poses, the dynamic that was started with the invasion of Crimea in 2014, the ramp-up of military spending by Russia, the build-up of military forces.
Bird flu scare has gripped the national capital. The fear spiked after dozens of birds were reported dead in zoo and deer park, which have been temporarily closed for time being now. The city has geared up with precautions to keep the deadly disease at bay. A Delhi government rapid response team on Friday visited Ghazipur chicken market and a few other birding sites in the city, where they conducted inspections, and 50 samples have been sent to Jalandhar laboratory to the test.
In Hobart, Australia, the fate of the most pristine ocean left on Earth and the thousands of species that call it home hangs in the balance. The Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, or CAMLARM, is currently meeting. The goal? To agree on a deal to conserve the Southern Ocean and manage its marine ecosystems. While the Commission is supposed to base its decisions on science, political tensions and commercial fishing interests may prove the ultimate decider.
Typhoon Haima has landed in the coast of China's southern Guangdong province, taking a direct hit at Shanwei City with a maximum speed of over 151 kilometers per hour. 4 towns in nearby regions have been cut off with power supply. In Shanwei City, over 28,000 people have been evacuated, and across the Guangdong province, over 720,000 people have been transferred to safe locations. All the major high-speed railways and expressways and the main city roads in the affected areas have been temporarily closed, and all the primary schools, middle schools, other vocational schools have been closed too. In the local airport, over 56 flights have been cancelled and many more are delayed. The typhoon Haima is expected to go along the northern direction and gradually ease off.
We do know the deaths are going up. People from Central America and Mexico looking for some relief from the terrible violence and poverty that they're suffering.
The need is there, the need to support their families and to get away from the violence in their countries.
We're at the U.S.-Mexico border, and in this area along the southwest border, 240 people died last year crossing from Mexico into the U.S. There's something strange happening at the U.S.-Mexico border. U.S. Border Patrol is seeing and apprehending fewer people crossing illegally into the country. But at the same time, the number of migrants dying at the border has remained steady, higher now than it was in the late 1990s.
So this looks like the real water drop. There's a good chance it was used by people walking through here.
Tucson Samaritans is one of several groups that drops water, food, and other aid on the trails migrants take into the U.S.
The fences tend to end when the going gets tough. People are forced to do more dangerous and desperate things, take different routes.
This is one of the spots where aid groups drop water and supplies for migrants coming across the border. We're up here in the mountains. You can't build a wall here, and this is an area where the Border Patrol might not find a lot of migrants who are crossing through into the U.S. We're seeing fewer people crossing the border, but more deaths.
The amount of deaths has not really diminished. I mean, it goes up and down a few numbers, not no.
Why is it held steady like that while fewer people have been coming?
Because of the more dangerous areas where they're crossing through. The areas are, you know, I mean, as you can see through here, it's very rocky, very slippery in some areas. People are walking through that have no idea of the terrain that they're going to be traveling through.
Hiking even a few hundred feet of these trails is not easy. And then you consider the fact that the migrants who cross through here have another 40 miles or so to go before they get to a safe place. What's the group's relationship with Homeland Security? Do they not like you guys being out here?
Generally, we have a cordial relationship with the individual agents. Of course, we're at cross purposes with their mission, but we're just providing basic humanitarian aid. We're going to keep doing what we do. One of our friends from Samaritans has been putting out these crosses all over the desert, commemorating the places where people have died. The other day he told me he's got almost 400 out now. They're all over the place.
Now to big questions about the Zika virus and transparency. 111 pregnant women already contracting the virus here in Florida.
Yeah, and tonight, I-Team investigator Jared Holbrook is digging to find out why the state is not identifying which counties they're actually in.
Spraying myself down with bug spray was a big thing for us.
For expectant mothers, Zika is always a concern on the mind.
Oh yeah, it is on my mind. Every time I get bit, I start freaking out.
Florida's Department of Health tracks Zika cases across the state. They release stats to the public. County by county, you can see how many Zika cases there are. Except for pregnant women. Pregnant women's stats are only counted and released statewide, so you can't find out how many pregnant women have Zika in the county you live in. Something expecting mothers we talk to would like to see change.
Definitely. I think it's a good, important information that everyone should have, you know, because it does affect your child.
We asked the Department of Health why they can't tell us the number of Zika cases impacting pregnant women by county. They cite privacy laws.
See, I don't see it that way as privacy. If there's no name involved, then they should. I think you should know it by county.
We asked health department reps how it violates privacy laws when the patient's name is still protected, and we're just asking for a number. So they started throwing exemption statutes at us. Like this one, ownership and control of patients' records. It can exempt the information, but there's a big however. Records may be released if the information, quote, is abstracted in such a way as to protect the identity of the patient. Another records exemption they threw at us was this one, epidemiological research. But it states information could be made public only when necessary to public health. After pointing this out to health department officials, they have ignored our emails and phone calls and are keeping the information private.
I disagree. I think this information should be available to everybody.
Congressman David Jolly says the governor needs to be more transparent with Zika information.
You know, my wife and I are hoping to have a family. It is very relevant to us what the current status of Zika is in Pinellas County.
Officials in London have been dealing with the evacuation of London City Airport. It's a smaller airport, not as big as Heathrow or Gatwick, closer to downtown London. Officials say passengers started feeling ill. Many of them, as you can see, have stepped outside of the building, gone out onto the tarmac, and all of the flights in and out of London City Airport are being held right now. Some type of chemical spill or chemical fire and fumes making people sick is getting the blame. London authorities are warning travelers to expect long delays. We're told that at least 2 people have been hospitalized. Ambulance crews treated 26 people there at the scene for difficulty breathing.
2 alarm fires sent plumes of smoke high into the air east of LA Friday. These pictures that you're about to see are from the city of Ontario. That's about 35 miles from downtown Los Angeles.
More than 50 people have died in Cameroon after a passenger train derailed. More than 8 carriages came off the rails near a station. The train was packed with commuters because a local road had collapsed, and extra wagons were added to accommodate the extra passengers.
Ethiopian authorities have arrested at least 1,500 protesters for violence and property damage under a 6-month state of emergency which was declared less than 2 weeks ago. According to the country's state media, protesters targeted foreign factories and burnt farms across the Oromia region. Authorities also seized hundreds of looted weapons. The region has seen months of anti-government protests, and the state of emergency was imposed after a stampede-turned protest at a religious festival which killed over 50 people on October 2nd.
Every month, doctors in the province of Buenos Aires have been out on strike. They claim the public health system in Argentina's largest province is in crisis.
They came from the length and breadth of the kingdom, as many of King Pumaban's subjects took the opportunity to bid a final farewell to their departed monarch.
A sea of people out here in front of the Grand Palace,
waiting to take part in this communal event to sing the King's anthem. And for many of these people, it's a final chance to say goodbye to the king that they love so much. The authorities estimate that between 100,000 and 400,000 people will be coming down to take part in this event, but even that might be a conservative estimate.
There was a transient female walking down the 2900 block of Connie. She actually had a skull in her possession.
New Yorkers are outraged after a 66-year-old black woman with schizophrenia was shot and killed by an NYPD police sergeant after suffering from a psychotic episode.
We are in a rigged system, and a big part of the rigging are these dishonest people in the media.
Keep emphasizing it. Florida, the polls have closed. Florida goes for Al Gore. If we say somebody is carried a state, you can pretty much take it to the bank, book it, that that's true.
Speaker of the House of Florida was Tom Feeney, one of my first introductions to him, and he wanted us to build a vote flipping software.
It takes only a few seconds to insert a computer virus into this voting machine.
I stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column.
Of asking the Attorney General to pursue criminal and civil actions against Diebold in this matter, based on findings of fraudulent actions.
You didn't have to sit across the street in a truck. You could just sit there and punch a button, and the votes all flip.
George Bush is the president-elect of the United States. He has won the state of Florida, according to our projections.
The effort I have underway is simply to make sure that all the votes are counted.
Our presidential election came down to one state where the brother of the man running for president was the governor of the state.
Here's my point.
According to the Washington Post, early evening exit polls pointed to a decisive win for Kerry.
Apparently what has happened is that the Associated Press, they were feeding numbers into us, and then suddenly those numbers changed. First of all, we want to find out what happened.
The leaked data revealed that in critical states, Kerry was ahead in the exit polls in 10 of the 12 swing states.
What I'm telling you is that the numbers changed, and sometimes these things happen.
And hundreds of thousands of votes shift, not in a progressive, incremental way, but in this almost complete, sudden, violent reversal.
This last Friday night, I arranged to meet Senator Kerry at a fundraiser to give him a copy of my book. He told me he now thinks the election was stolen. He said he doesn't believe that he's the person who can go out front on the issue because of the sour grapes, question. But he said he believes it was stolen. He says he argues about this with his Democratic colleagues on the Hill. He had just had a big fight with Christopher Dodd about it because he said, there's this stuff about the voting machines, they're really questionable. And Dodd was angry. I don't want to hear about it. I've looked into it, there's nothing there. Well, there's plenty there.
I raise this objection because I am convinced that we as a body must conduct a formal and legitimate debate about election irregularities. I raise this objection to debate the process and protect the integrity of the true will of the people.
So we do move into the 2008 election cycle with many of the same problems that we had going all the way back to 2000 and the fiasco in Florida.
Some electronic voting machines in West Virginia were selecting McCain when voters actually punched Obama. Yep.
Smartmatic and other voting machine companies are private companies. They have proprietary software that can call a trade secret.
Even the New York Times indicated last week that over 30% of the Acorn registrations are bogus, fraud, or fake. And that should be disconcerting to anyone who cares about free and fair elections.
All right,
the concern is that these fraudulent registrations are going to lead to fraudulent voting. And in a close race, whether it be in Ohio or Nevada or elsewhere, this is where this Acorn scandal, I think, is going to have a potentially explosive impact on Election Day.
All right,
But of most concern, of course, are the separate computer systems that count and report actual votes. So far, no sign that any of those have been compromised.
Lapel conducted a demonstration
where he actually changed the votes in the machine by swapping out the machine's computer chip for one that he programmed.
This black box is an unaccountable, untestable, privately run software from the two companies that you have hired to count our votes. So when the votes come out of this black box, they do not reflect the New York City or the national votes. In 22 primaries, the votes have shifted in 20 of them. The exit polling data in New York State shifted 12%. A shift of 2% is fraud, according to the U.S. State Department. So that's what we've seen across the country.
I figured out how to make a slightly different computer program that just before the close of the polls, it shifts some votes around from one candidate to another.
The work we did to prepare for Hillary Clinton to be our nominee and then make sure that we could get her elected president is absolutely critical to advancing the issues.
Of course the elections will not be rigged. What does that mean?
And also, this is what I really want to say. All the people, I hear this all the time. You get in conversations, and there's not a person in this room who hasn't been in the same conversation where people say, I just don't know if I like her. She's not coming over your house. You don't have to like her. You don't have to like her. Do you like this country?
I hear you.
Do you like this country? You better get out there and vote.
I love this country.
The Clinton campaign launching a new attack against Donald Trump. Campaign spokesman Brian Fallon pointing to the damaging release of emails from the account of Chairman John Podesta, claiming it shows Trump may be working with the Russians. Fallon suggesting, quote, his unwillingness to speak out against this unprecedented interference in our elections combined with his campaigns and companies' many connections to Russia raised troubling questions about whether he has had advanced knowledge of any of these activities. Ambassador James Woolsey is on Trump's transition team and former director of the CIA. Good to have you, sir.
Good to be with you.
What do you think of it? What do you make of these allegations coming from the Clinton campaign?
Conspiracy theory?
Clarence Bartlett is no fan of Democrats.
Them blame Democrats and all them ticks has ruined this country, and we're trying to get it back.
Outside this Trump rally near Asheville, North Carolina, I ask him what's going to happen if Trump wins. His answer's a shock.
Oh, they'll kill him if he gets elected. That's how bad they are. They're the most evilest people I ever seen, lying to now.
Who would kill him?
Well, the Democrats are the ones that's trying to cause riots and everything. It's obvious. It's in the news.
Bartlett isn't the only one predicting violence. Janet Stengel thinks it could happen if Trump loses.
Personally, I think it could turn into a civil war because they're
really think that?
Absolutely. First of all, I think that we're going to have terrorist attacks, and we have all of these protests and all of that. And so I think people are going to be very upset.
Oh yes, baby, it is on. Congress is set to launch an investigation on Hillary's State Department officials' pay-to-play scheme. Yes, maybe we will finally see the justice that we seek. But you know what? My initial instinct on this report is they're just going to throw some poor underling under the bus. He's going to take the heat, and that'll be all the blood we need.
EU leaders were back to business on Friday morning for the final day of the European Council. The big item on the agenda, to stop the EU-Canada trade deal from unravelling. CETA is currently blocked because of an objection by Belgium's regional Walloon Parliament.
I'm not happy with today's situation, to be honest, but I am and I remain a Democrat. And the democratic values are the DNA of this European project.
As leaders emerged from their talks to address the media, there was a realization that CETA was dangerously close to being dead in the water.
Our citizens are increasingly concerned about whether the trade deals we negotiate are in their best interest. And I am afraid that we won't be able to continue to negotiate FTAs if we do not prove in practice that we are very serious about protecting European consumers, workers and companies.
Well, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has asked Japan not to meddle in China-Philippine relations. And this was in response to Japanese media reports that Japan's government urged the Philippines to uphold an arbitral award on the South China Sea territorial dispute with China.
Gunfire erupted on the streets of the Iraqi city of Kirkuk.
after ISIS militants launched a surprise attack. Video captured the terrorists entering at night. Ongoing clashes reported. ISIS's sudden attack into Kirkuk, some 100 miles southeast of Mosul, is seen by U.S. military officials as an ISIS attempt to divert Iraqi forces from the larger fight to retake Mosul.
I created reptiles.
The anonymous group released a video talking about this document that supposedly exposes a plan for the DNC to stage a fake alien invasion on November 8th, otherwise known as Election Day. The document, which shows here to be coming from something called the Benison Strategy Group, and then we have the Clinton Foundation logo here. But basically what the PDF is a list of statistics and voting stats that breaks down the type of people who are leaning more towards Trump. And the document shows that over 73% of independents who have been exposed to alternative media, which would be something like our channel here, or WikiLeaks, that a large majority of moderates, over 70%, are aware of the WikiLeaks email dump. And it also shows that people who are exposed to alternative media actually are leaning away from Hillary and are either not going to vote or are voting Trump. The report also breaks down these polls where it shows that both women and African Americans, which came to only around maybe 8%, have ever watched or listened to alternative media. And so many of the woman and African American populations are in the dark about the email dump and some of the more dark things that Hillary has had her hand in. Now, the document, as you read further, goes on to break down the ways in which the DNC would be able to prevent these specific voters from voting on November 8th. Here you're seeing a screenshot of that where we have a storm would potentially cause only 2% of people to not go out and vote, a powerful storm, Zika or other epidemiological agent, threat of violence at polling places, long lines, and so on. And as you read further, things start to get a little bit more scary, and we start seeing them talk about possibilities that could prevent people from voting, such as you're seeing here, and they even have their own little code names like Red Dawn, Cobalt Rain, BL Riot, where they talk about staging civil unrest that could prevent pockets of America from voting. They go on to talk about HARP, which is the well-known weather manipulation, a system that was supposedly shut down recently, but we know is back up and running. And then they go on to something called fire sign. And that is what we want to talk about today. And I'm going to read to you what it says here. It says, and I quote, "For almost 2 decades, the Department of Defense and NASA have coordinated on a black book project under the codename Fire Sign. Fire Sign's aim is to create a religious awe effect in enemy populations to create an instantaneous psychological soft kill. The operation uses high-powered lasers to project real-seeming images on the sodium layer 100 kilometers above the surface. These images can cover hundreds or even thousands of square miles and can appear completely real, three-dimensional, and can move. These visual cues are augmented with pulsed ELF electromagnetic emissions that attack the specific areas of the prefrontal cortex that are stimulated during religious experience." So then we go down here and we see this little diagram of this laser Project Bluebeam style apparatus here projecting a flying saucer in the sky. It goes on to state that the fire sign scenario is that of an invading extraterrestrial force of nearly incomprehensible scale. And in a nutshell, basically what this document is saying is that this technology does exist and that it would be used in the areas where voters are likely to lean towards Trump. They would simulate a fake alien invasion. The President of the United States, President Obama, would be able to, quote, call a halt to the invasion, save the day, and then hand over the torch to Clinton, providing the basic continuity of state. So, it's a lot to take in. It's very frightening if legitimate. And, I mean, at this point, we don't know whether it's real or not. We know that Anonymous has, very much like WikiLeaks, hacked into and released legitimate files in the past. They do have a track record of releasing legitimate documents that they have found that have been covered up. And so, we really have to use our common sense. And, I mean, when you have a document like this, you really can't say whether it's real or not until you get some more information to corroborate it. We already do have some information that would seem to corroborate the possibility of a faked hologram alien invasion. I know many of you guys have talked about this in the comments section, and many of you believe that a lot of the UFO sightings we publish on this channel are in fact not real, but are holograms. There is something known as Project Bluebeam, which specifically relates to the using of holograms to create these faked images, whether it's the second coming of Christ or an alien invasion. The allegations of Project Bluebeam were first presented in 1994 by a Canadian journalist by the name of Serge Monast, who actually even talked about it when he published a book entitled Project Bluebeam. Now, what many people don't know is that Mr. Monast, as well as another unnamed journalist, both died of heart attacks in 1996, with many believing that they were assassinated. And that furthermore, there were reports of the Canadian government having kidnapped Monast's daughter in an effort to dissuade him from investigating Project Bluebeam further. We've had various researchers and government witnesses talk about the use of these holograms as a way to prevent elections or initiate martial law, take over the world, take over the country. And at this point, I mean, you know, you guys can check out the document for yourselves. If real, it's very scary. Some have said that the document is just too crazy to be believed. But I ask you, is the craziness of an allegation reason enough to be used as evidence that it's untrue?